You are 31 years old and you are good at math. Not the kind of math that gets you into a university or earns you a title, but the kind that keeps a mid-level distribution network solvent and invisible, the kind where you track supply against demand, against margins, against risk in your head. Because writing it down is how people get arrested. For 5 years, you run the books for a man named Cortez, who moves product through 3 neighborhoods on the south side and pays his people on time and keeps his operation clean enough that the task forces always seem to look 1 degree past him. You are why they look past him. You are the reason the numbers never trigger an alert, never create a pattern, never give a prosecutor a thread to pull. You do not carry. You do not sell. You do not stand anywhere visible. You are the accountant, and accountants are boring, and boring is the only form of safety available in this work. The task force moves on a Tuesday morning at 5 a.m. across 11 addresses simultaneously. You are asleep when they hit your door. You are processed, held, indicted, and sitting in a federal courtroom within 72 hours. The prosecutor offers a deal on day 4. You decline not because you are loyal to Cortez. Loyalty is a transaction like everything else, and this transaction has already closed, but because you know what happens to the people who take deals in the world you came from. And 22 years in federal custody is a problem you can survive in a way that certain other problems are not. You go to trial. The evidence is overwhelming and organized and presented with the patience of people who have been building it for 3 years. The judge gives you 22 years. Your lawyer files an appeal. The appeal is denied 14 months later. 3 months after sentencing, a transport van carries you north through flat gray terrain to Harrogate Federal Correctional Complex. You know the name before you arrive. Everyone in your world knows the name. It is a Supermax facility, the federal system's answer to the men it considers too connected, too dangerous, or too operationally capable to house in a standard institution. You are in the 3rd category. The prosecutor made sure that designation followed you. The van passes through 3 successive security gates, each one sealed behind you before the next one opens. You count them not because you are frightened, but because you are already working. You are already measuring the space you have been given. Inside, they strip you, process you, issue you a number, and walk you down a corridor of solid metal doors to a cell 7 feet wide and 12 feet long. You sit on the concrete platform that serves as a bed, and you do the only thing you have ever been genuinely good at. You start counting what you have. What you have is a number, a cell, 22 years, and a reputation that, you will discover within the week, arrived before you did. You spend your first 3 months doing nothing that looks like anything. You take meals through the slot. You exercise in your cell. You speak when spoken to and not extensively. What you are actually doing during those 3 months is building a complete mental map of the unit's social and economic architecture, because the first thing you understood when you arrived is that a Supermax is not an absence of economy. It is a compressed one. Every restriction the institution imposes on legitimate access creates a corresponding demand in the shadow market that exists beneath it. The commissary runs once a week and stocks only what the administration approves. What the commissary does not stock is available anyway, at markup, through a supply chain you cannot yet see, but can already feel the shape of by watching who has what and who owes whom and which correction officers never quite meet certain inmates' eyes. The man who runs the current economy on your unit is named Reyes. He has been in federal custody for 17 years, arrived here from a California facility after an incident the administration could not ignore, and controls the unit the way a seasoned manager controls a department through a combination of service provision, debt management, and the credible implication of consequences for noncompliance. He runs the drug supply, a lending operation the inmates call the store, and a protection arrangement that functions as a tax on any independent commercial activity in his territory. You watch him for 90 days before you form a single opinion. What you conclude at the end of 90 days is that Reyes is effective at running what he has and almost entirely blind to what he could have. You identify 4 structural inefficiencies in his operation that are costing him somewhere between 20 and 30% of his potential revenue. You say nothing. You keep counting. He approaches you in month 4. He has been asking about you through channels you were not aware he had, and someone who knew Cortez's operation told him what you did there. He has a specific problem, A shipment came in 3 units short, but he was charged for a full delivery, and he cannot tell whether he is being skimmed by the correction officer running the pipeline or whether the loss happened upstream. You ask him 3 questions about timing, delivery method, and the officer's recent behavior pattern. You give him the answer in under a minute. He looks at you for a long time without speaking. Then he says, "Come back tomorrow." You come back every day for 2 weeks. By the end of the second week, you are running his books. The books, in this context, are not books at all. They are a living architecture, maintained entirely in your memory, a multi-currency ledger that tracks transactions denominated in commissary goods, drug product, phone time, and favors, each of which trades against the others at rates that fluctuate based on supply and institutional pressure. Cash is nearly useless inside Harrogate. Inmate accounts are monitored, transfers are flagged, and the administration reviews any pattern that suggests coordination. What moves value here is everything the administration cannot easily quantify. A pack of mackerel that can be redeemed for a specific service, a phone rental that gives a man an hour of contact with the outside world, a debt instrument that matures in 2 weeks and carries a 30% return. You understand this system immediately because it is structurally identical to every informal economy you have ever worked in. The asset classes are different. The fundamentals are the same. The first thing you restructure is the lending operation. The previous model is crude and self-defeating. Borrow product, repay double within 14 days, miss the deadline, and face physical consequences. The problem with this model is not its harshness. Harshness is a legitimate enforcement mechanism. The problem is that it destroys the borrower's ability to repay, which converts a revenue-generating relationship into an enforcement problem, which creates exactly the kind of visible violence that attracts administrative attention and produces informants. You propose a tiered system: lower initial rates, extended windows, escalating financial penalties, before physical consequences become relevant. Within 4 months, the lending operations default rate drops by half. The unit becomes measurably quieter. The administration does not know why. That invisibility is the entire design. The second thing you restructure is the correction officer network. Reyes has 3 officers on arrangement, 2 handling drug transport, 1 providing advance notice of search schedules. The relationships are purely transactional, which means they are fragile. An officer operating on financial incentive alone will take a better offer, will panic under pressure, will make decisions based on their own fear rather than the operation's stability. You spend 6 months building a different kind of relationship with each one, not through threat, not through additional money, but through the patient accumulation of specific knowledge about each person's vulnerabilities, dependencies, and psychological needs. One officer has a debt problem. You provide a solution that creates obligation. A second officer has a history that creates exposure to a specific kind of pressure. You make clear, very quietly, that this history is known and that your continued silence is contingent on continued cooperation. The third officer is the most useful and most dangerous of the 3, genuinely, ideologically comfortable with what they are doing, which means they are not operating from fear, which means they are reliable in ways the others are not. You invest in this relationship carefully and differently. By the end of your second year, the CO network is generating twice the product flow at 2/3 the previous cost in payments, and it has not had a significant failure in 11 months. Reyes suffers a stroke 16 months into your arrangement. He is moved to the medical unit within hours and does not return. What follows is the most dangerous period of your time at Harrogate, not because of any direct threat to you, but because power vacuums in a Supermax environment do not stay vacant, and the process of filling them is violent and unpredictable, and violence and unpredictability are the 2 conditions most hostile to the kind of operation you have built. 3 men have credible succession claims. 2 have gang affiliations that mean any arrangement here is provisional on approvals from leadership structures operating in other facilities across the country, approvals that take time, involve their own political costs, and may arrive with conditions attached. The third man, Drummond, is independent, intelligent, has been watching your work for over a year, and comes to your door the morning after Reyes is transferred. He does not ask you to choose sides. He asks you to tell him what the operation is worth and what it would take to keep it stable through the transition. You give him an accurate figure and a 3-part stabilization plan. He listens to all of it before speaking. Then he asks the actual question, the one underneath the operational one. What do you want out of this? You tell him. You want to design and manage the financial architecture of whatever structure emerges. Not the product line, not the enforcement, not the visible leadership. Those are high-profile positions that attract attention and carry consequences you have no interest in owning. You want to be structural rather than political. You want a percentage of gross rather than net, because net is negotiable and you know exactly how to negotiate it. And you want your position to be independent of whoever holds nominal leadership, meaning it survives political changes, because it is a function, not a loyalty. Drummond agrees. Over the following 3 weeks, you manage the transition by giving each of the 2 affiliated claimants enough of what they want: territorial recognition, product allocation agreements, the specific performances of respect that matter in this environment that neither has a compelling reason to press for escalation. The transition costs 1 week of reduced revenue. It costs 0 deaths. The administration is confused by the stability. You are not confused by anything. By your 3rd year, you are running a diversified operation with 4 distinct revenue lines. The drug supply remains the largest product entering through the restructured CO network and a mail pipeline that uses chemical saturation on paper with a markup of 4 to 6 times street value, because demand inside a Supermax is inelastic in ways that would make any legitimate pricing analyst envious. The store operation provides liquidity and generates 30% returns on 2-week cycles. The phone network, 7 devices rotating through the facility at any given time, generates roughly $1,400 weekly before costs, renting to men who need contact with attorneys, families, and, in several cases, operations they are still directing from inside their cells. And the information business, which you built from nothing and which has no parallel in anything Reyes ever ran, has become the cleanest and most strategically valuable part of the entire architecture. The information network works through inmates placed in facility jobs, kitchen, laundry, maintenance, who have physical access to spaces and conversational proximity to staff that cell-bound inmates cannot achieve. You compensate them with product credits and store access, and you process everything they bring you against a framework for identifying what is operationally relevant. Search, schedule changes, transfer orders, administrative decisions, legal proceedings involving men on the unit, all of it is collected, evaluated, and distributed to the people who need it most at a price calibrated to what the information is worth to them. A man who receives 24 hours advance notice of a cell search can move his product. A man who learns that an associate is meeting with investigators can adjust his behavior. The information business leaves no physical evidence, requires no physical enforcement, and generates returns that are effectively pure margin after the compensation costs of the network. It is the most elegant thing you have ever built. The new warden arrives in your 5th year. She is competent in a way her predecessor was not specifically. She is competent at identifying that something is operating underneath the surface of the unit's apparent compliance without being able to see its structure. She increases search frequency, disrupts the commissary rotation to interfere with lending cycles, installs additional cameras in common areas. You adapt to each change within 72 hours. She is targeting the visible symptoms of the operation, the product, the phones, the lending activity without understanding that these are outputs of a financial system she cannot perceive, because you designed the system specifically so that no single arrest or seizure would reveal the whole. She is finding nodes. The network is not the nodes. She transfers Drummond at the 8-month mark of her tenure. She believes this is a structural disruption. Drummond is the visible head of the operation as far as administration intelligence understands it. Removing him, from her perspective, is removing the leadership. What she does not know is that the leadership, in any meaningful sense, is the financial architecture you maintain. Drummond held the political position. The political position can be held by someone else. You brief his replacement in 2 conversations. The operation does not lose a single revenue cycle. A letter arrives in your 7th year. It is from a federal investigative unit running a parallel case, and it informs you, as the law requires, that a cooperating witness has provided information consistent with coordinated criminal activity at Harrogate. You read it twice, set it down, and spend the next 6 hours completely still. You are not panicking. Panic is a luxury you have not been able to afford for years. What you are doing is running a probability analysis on the 3 people who know enough about the financial architecture to constitute a serious risk. You have no confirmation of which one has talked. You have behavioral data, incentive structures, and stress indicators for each of them, and you run those inputs against the pattern of what a cooperating witness would most likely have been able to provide. Within 48 hours, you have a most likely candidate. You are not certain. Certainty is not available in this situation. But certainty has never been the standard you operate to probability-weighted action is, and the probability here is sufficient. You do not respond with violence. You never use violence as a first-order response to information problems, partly because violence is irreversible and information situations are often more ambiguous than they initially appear, and partly because violence in this context produces administrative attention that is far more costly than almost any information leak. What you do instead is restructure that person's situation. Their access to store credit is quietly reduced. Their standing in certain informal social arrangements on the unit shifts in ways that are difficult to trace to any single decision. Their comfort level decreases along axes that are invisible to the administration and unmeasurable to an outside investigator. Their incentive to continue cooperating deteriorates. Over 60 days, the investigation's momentum stalls. You receive no follow-up letter. You do not know whether your intervention caused this or whether the witness had less information than you feared. You treat that uncertainty as permanent and you do not revisit the decision. What is done is done. What matters is what you do next. In your 9th year, a federal attorney sits across from you in a monitored room and makes an offer. A separate investigation has identified that the phone network you operate was used to conduct outside business by an organization you had no direct relationship with. They rented access like anyone else, and what they used it for was their own affair. The attorney wants the outside organization. She does not know she is sitting across from the person who designed everything. She thinks she is talking to a mid-level figure who might have useful peripheral knowledge. You let her think this because it is the most valuable thing about this conversation. You spend 72 hours deciding what to give her and what to keep. What you give her is the outside organization. That relationship was always a liability you inherited rather than built, and severing it costs you nothing operationally. What you keep is everything that belongs to Harrogate. The internal architecture, the CO relationships, the information network, none of it appears in what you offer. She accepts the terms. 12 years off your remaining sentence. Transferred to a medium security facility within 18 months. You shake her hand and return to your cell and sit down and run the numbers on what comes next. You are 39 years old. You have 11 years left. Now, instead of 22. You are leaving an operation in place that will continue functioning after your transfer because you built it to be structural rather than personal. The financial logic holds regardless of who occupies your position because you designed it that way deliberately. You will arrive at the medium security facility with a reputation that will precede you and a skill set that has only become more refined under the conditions of the last 8 years. You understand supply chains, debt instruments, information networks, human incentive structures, and the specific art of building systems that survive the removal of any individual component, including yourself. What you do not have is anything you can show a parole board as evidence of rehabilitation, because nothing you have done in the last 8 years is visible to the people who will determine whether 11 years becomes fewer. What you have instead is a body of work that exists entirely beneath the surface of what any institution can measure. A shadow economy that has kept a unit of 63 of the most dangerous men in the federal system operating, in a stable equilibrium that the formal management structure has repeatedly failed to achieve on its own. You are not sure what to do with that. You have never been sure what to do with the gap between what you are good at and what the world officially values. You closed the ledger on that question a long time ago, and you have not opened it since. Somewhere in the facility, a transfer order is being processed with your name on it. Somewhere in a medium security facility, 3 states over, a unit is operating under conditions that will, In 18 months, include your arrival. You do not know who runs the economy there yet. You do not know what its inefficiencies are or where its vulnerabilities sit or what its CO network looks like or whether the information architecture is functional or primitive. You will know within 90 days of arriving. The phone rings in the warden's office one floor above you. Somewhere in the system, a decision is being made that will reach you in the form of a document slid through a slot in a metal door. You sit with the stillness that 9 years of Supermax has refined into something very close to a physical skill, and you wait. You are already counting.